welcome to the Socks for Mom podcast. I'm coming to you today from a very gloomy East Texas. I've been waiting for the sun for days to record this, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon. So I'm just going to go with it. And welcome. My name is Becky. You can find me as Socks for Mom all across social media. We have a Ravelry group, the Socks for Mom podcast on Ravelry. Please come on over and join us. We have a knitting along going on right now that I'll talk about. And I've had a lot of unfortunate things happen this week in the world of knitting. But gotta roll with the punches, right? I'll tell you about that, but first I'll tell you about some of the things that made me happy this week. So let's get started. As I said, we have a knit along going on. The Wunderland Sock Club knit along is happening over on Ravelry, and people are knitting the first sock, the Wunderland sock, right now. I have the other sock is almost finished. It's been in testing. I have 7 incredible testers, and we've been working through that last pair of socks. I've made a few changes. Let me see, where is it? Here, around here somewhere. Oh, here it is. I am surrounded by fiber. So I have made a change to the pattern, and I've eliminated the back ribbing. So here it is. I'm knitting this in Stroll Knit Picks, and this color is Duchess. And it's a little dark, so I'm not sure how well you can see the cabling, but I've changed it to have the ribbing going down the back. I just couldn't get the ribbing numbers to work for the medium size. So as I said, several people have already finished it. It looks lovely. I'm excited to send this to you guys who have joined the club. And also a little reminder that this is a great beginning stranded project for any of you who may want to try that. One of my testers has never stranded before, and she thought she'd wait. She has a class at the end of January, and she thought she'd wait to start testing until after then. And then when she saw everyone working on theirs, she decided she'd jump in, and she has not had a bit of problem because, as I've mentioned before, you only knit 3 colors. You never knit more than 3 colors, so you don't have to worry about the twisting and weaving in on the back of the threads. That's one less worry you have to do. So here it is. I think it will be coming to you in a week, possibly a little bit longer, but this is the Duchess sock. So in other news, I'm going to have a little blast from the past, and I want to tell you about probably one of my first design projects. It's been out there a long time, and there's a little bit of a funny story that goes with it, but let me first tell you about it. A friend of mine, we read a book together. Let me pull it up here for you. It was the Guernsey Literary Potato Peel Society. I need to be careful not to mess it up with the name of my hat. And it was an incredible book. It was a historical fiction, and it took place during World War II when the island of Guernsey was occupied by the Germans. And the Germans, first the Guernsey inhabitants put their children on a ship that came and picked them up and took them to the mainland so that they were not there during the occupation. And then the inhabitants of Guernsey would break the curfew, and because the Germans came in and they imposed a curfew on them, and they would get together after curfew hours to meet and socialize and feast on a pig or something like that when they weren't supposed to have any pigs. All the pigs were supposed to go to the Germans. And then if they were caught, they would tell the German soldier, "Oh, I'm on my way to the Guernsey Literary Society, Potato Peel Society." And so that's how they got away with it. Anyways, it's a delightful story. There's an author over in England who happens to get a letter from one of the Guernsey people, and they start this lettering back and forth to each other, and that's how she finds out this story of the things that happened during the war. And it was so much fun to read. I've read it twice now. I'll probably read it a third time. I wish I had a picture to show you of the cover, but somehow my copy's gone missing. But here's a picture of what it looks like on Amazon. It's written by Marianne Schaefer and Annie Barrows, and on Amazon they have a video link of the author telling about how she came about writing this book. So my friend and I, we had so much fun reading it that I decided to design a hat after the colorful characters in the book. So I designed this hat. It's called the Guernsey Potato Peel Hat, and it's out there on Ravelry. But there's kind of a funny little story that goes along with it that's been kind of my secret, but I'm going to let it out now. When I designed this hat, I had just had surgery on my eyes. I had the PRK to correct my vision. Excuse me. Which is basically a very hard way to get your eyes corrected. Hold on. Because they essentially burn your cornea and you really can't see until those cells start to grow back. And so when I designed this hat, I couldn't even see the computer screen. Plus, I was on pain pills. And so I put this out there and then just kind of forgot about it. And maybe a year or so ago, I started reading people's comments, and they weren't very happy because there wasn't a key in the pattern. There was no explanation on how to do decreases, the crown decreases. And they also didn't like the way some of the motifs didn't line up. If you can see here, this needs to be over a stitch. So I've corrected all that. The pattern is out there now. It's the Guernsey Potato Peel hat. It's free. It's a free pattern. And I just want to share something with you. This is my tip for today. This is a Fair Isle tip. So a lot of people have problems when they see a chart like this. This is a crown chart. And they're confused on how to do the decreases. And basically this column here represents those decreases, the crown decrease. And you divide the crown into parts. This one is divided into 6 wheel segments. You'll see right here. These are the segments. And these are the decreases right here. And this decrease line is a centered decrease, which means you slip 2 stitches and you knit 1 and you pass those 2 slip stitches over that stitch. That makes this decrease. And that is represented by this tall column here. And all of these white squares are basically the stitches that are absorbed into that decrease. So when you read a crown chart like this, this is kind of the main way these charts are drawn. There is another way, but this is the way I prefer. You start your first round, and here, you can't see it because my red ink is out, but I've drawn a line down here, a red line. When you start your crown decreases, you start the beginning of your round right here. And you knit across, and then come back and knit across. This is where you'll put your stitch markers. So when you get up here to a decrease round, you will knit here, and then you'll do your decrease, and the center stitch of your decrease is represented over here, and then you knit to the center again, and then you start your next segment. You knit out to here, and if there's a decrease, it's where these ladders are, not ladders, steps are, that's where you decrease. The next round you don't decrease. You decrease on this step, and then the next round you don't decrease. So that is basically how you do it. If you guys need a tutorial, I would be happy to do a tutorial. But I just wanted to point that out if you do go out there and download this pattern. Sorry about my ink. My ink is dry. One of the colors is dry, needs to be replaced. So anyways, that's the story of the Guernsey potato peel hat. So that's my blast from the past. So next up, I have reinstituted my UFO Thursday. And what I do on UFO Thursdays is that is the day I take something that's been lingering, something that I've stuffed in a basket and I've never finished. I pull that out and I'm going to work on that for the whole month. Rather than, I really tried last year to get everything off my needles before the end of the year, but that just didn't happen. And rather than spending my whole January doing that, this is what I've decided to do. So the first thing that I'm working on is the Bousta Beanie that I started back in September. And this was for Shetland Wool Week. Here's what it looks like. This is a free pattern on Ravelry. It was designed by Gudrun Johnson, who was the sponsor, not sponsor, is that what they call them? Patron for Shetland Wool Week. I don't know what they call that. Anyways, this is another very good pattern for beginning stranded, to put your foot into stranding, because it also, there's no longer than a 3-stitch stretch, so you don't have to worry about your floats on that either. So I'm knitting mine out of stash yarn. I have a lot of Shetland wool, and I'm knitting mine in these colors. So this is Spindrift, Jameson Spindrift. So I believe that I am just about done with the repeats. I have one more to go, or half of one, and then I start all the decreases. One of the things I wanted to share with you guys is that my preference is to knit stranded work on wooden needles, because the yarn is quite sticky, and that's what you want when you knit Fair Isle. Fair Isle knitting originated from the islands of Fair Isle, and this is the kind of wool that they had. They had Shetland sheep, and that's what they knit with. And there's really nothing that compares or works quite as well as Shetland wool or jumper weight wool like this when you knit Fair Isle. So anyways, because of the stickiness, when I knit with a metal needle, it just slides along a little bit too fast, and I don't have as much control because you really, it's best to stretch these stitches out as you're knitting to get an even tension. And I just can control it better with wood. Maybe other people have another preference, but this is what I like. This is what works best for me. So that is the Bousta Beanie, and that's my UFO Thursday. A great first stranded project for anybody that wants to try Fair Isle. So let me move on to things that made me happy this week, because there were plenty of disappointing moments. And so I'm going to start with my happy things. First off is something that is making everybody happy all around the world, and that's the granny stripe blanket that's crocheted. So many people are knitting this. And just about all of them say, I just couldn't put it down. Well, here's mine. And last week when I was in the car, we traveled to Tennessee to visit our daughter and son-in-law and our grandkiddos. I had this in the car, and this helped me through many a frustrating design moment that I had on other things I was working on. Now, I ripped this out at the beginning of the year because I wasn't understanding how to do the edges. And I think I mentioned that on another podcast. So I read a bunch of things, I watched a lot of videos, I wrapped my mind around it, and I finally figured it out. And I started over with the intention of knitting 1 row a day. And that's probably about 30 minutes of knitting, maybe. Anyways, I don't know if I'll keep up at that rate. I think I'm a day or 2 behind. But I just love this project. And when you have a little Westie sitting in your lap, it's the best thing to work on. So here it is, the granny stripe blanket. The project notes are on my Ravelry page. I'm doing what everybody else is doing, though. I'm not doing anything they are, so you can hear lots of podcasters talking about it. And I love just throwing in my little bits and bobs down here. And I'm not doing a magic ball because, is that what they call it? Because it's where you have a certain way you tie. I am doing the magic knot, but I'm not making a big ball because I really like picking the colors out as I go. That's a lot of the fun for me. So this has made me happy. Something else that's made me happy is just plain vanilla socks that I carry around in the car with me. And I have 2 on the needles. I'm knitting them concurrently, but not 2 at a time because I really don't like 2 at a time. But these are some Felici's. This is Goth Kitty, Knit Picks Felici. And I had a long cuff and just plain old stockinette. So that made me happy this week. Just watching the colors change, just something mindless plain. It's always great to have a pair in your car for on the go, for those moments when you're feeling frustrated, you want to knit but you don't want to think. It's great to have one of these, and I'm carrying this in one of my Bihn bags. This is probably my favorite Bihn because it has a plastic on both sides, 2 separate compartments that zip open, and I like this. I usually put a sock on each side. So that made me happy. Something else that made me happy is picking up some cross stitch. I've been watching Ellie on Craft House Magic, and she has a lot of inspiring, she does a lot of things. and it reminded me of when I used to cross stitch. And that's what I did when I met my husband 36 years ago, 37 years ago. That's all I did. And in fact, one of the first gifts I gave him, I made a whole series of sailboat cross-stitch pictures and framed them for his study in his house because he had a sailboat. We used to go sailing all the time. And that's what I did when my girls were little and they were toddlers. So anyways, I kind of got the itch and I went online and I thought it would be fun to decorate my fiber studio with sheepy things. So I found this. This is a Little House Needleworks. It's the Warm Winter Woolies. And what I really liked about this, I was really drawn to that mustard yellow. And there were several. This designer, Little House Needleworks, they have a lot of sheepy pictures. So it doesn't use traditional DMC. It used something called Classic Colorworks. So I have brandied pears, bean cherry, weeping willow, toasted marshmallow, and caterpillar. And here's all I have so far. I like these kind of scroll frames to keep things on. You can turn it as you go and adjust it. So this is what I have so far. Not much. But my husband and I were listening to a book on tape, and we sat out in our sunroom a lot this week, and this was perfect because it was nice and sunny one of the days. Anyways, that's the best light in the house. I probably should have recorded out there, but kind of echoes, so I didn't. But I also like to keep all my needles on the side here. And when I'm done, I just simply do a figure 8, and that thread's ready to go next time. So that made me happy. Something else, a gadget that I have, because it is getting harder for me to see as I get older. I clip on this little magnifying glass thing, and that helps me. I don't really know what it's called. It says daylight right there, because really it's not lit. You just use it in the daylight. So that is my cross stitch, and that made me really happy, and it's in one of my longer burger baskets. All right, it's time to crack on and tell you all my disappointing stuff. So, I told you about UFO Thursday. Let me stretch out here. I'm sitting on the floor. I'm also working on my Make 9. And my first Make 9, right here, the Birkin, has met with an unfortunate disaster. Frogging. Well, not yet, but it's going to be. So let me tell you about Birkin. So I've been watching Skandir, Ellie of Skandir, and Emily of Fibertown have both knit the Birkin, and they both have had big issues with the fit. Ellie actually said to knit a couple sizes bigger, which I didn't hear because I'd already started it. And Emily also, the issue is because the yoke goes across here and it makes it too tight for your shoulders to move. So Emily discovered that her row gauge was way off. So I decided I better check mine, because she was all the way through the beautiful yoke, and hers is stunning. My gauge is not at all right either. My stitch gauge is fine, but there's no way I'm going to hit that row gauge. And I'll tell you, I've got maybe some issues with the pattern. Here it is. Hi. And the pattern, the issue's going to be is that there's no increases at all in this yoke right here after you start it. And so this whole part here is going to be stretched over your shoulders. And I've got gauge on my stitches, but it's going to be way too long through the yoke on my row gauge. And that's going to make a huge difference in how it fits right through this part of my shoulder. Because if that tight part, if it's way down here, it's going to like close my arm in right there. It needs to be right up here. So if I don't get the exact row gauge that the designer got, I'm in trouble. Emily was in trouble. So was Ellie. Now I don't know, Ellie never talked about her gauge. She just mainly talked about the increases, and how they needed to have more, but you couldn't because of the pattern. So I pulled out some of my Fair Isle books, the ones that I really trust a lot. I pulled out, not trust, but they're classics. This one, Fair Isle Knitting by Sarah Dawn. And I looked at her pattern for her Fair Isle, for her yoked sweater. And her tension is much tighter than the Birkin sweater. It's much tighter. And actually, the body of her sweater is the same as the body of the Birkin, but she tightens up. This book was 1978, by the way. Her stranded part, she drops down in needle size and gets this even tighter. She's at like 8.5 stitches per inch over the patterning, as opposed to 7.5 for the body. That's a crazy difference. Most modern Fair Isle patterns that I'm seeing today are having you bump up the stranded part, bump the needle size up so you can have consistent stitch gauge all the way across. They're not having you shrink down this section. I think that may be a problem. So then I went to my other favorite Fair Isle book. This one, The Art of Fair Isle Knitting, The History, Technique, Color, and Patterns by Anne Feltenson. Same thing. Her pattern in here is exactly the same, where she has a much tighter gauge across the color work of the yoke than the body. What's up with that? So, do I trust these people? These are traditional Shetland Fair Isle knitters. I think I do. I think I'm going to listen to this. So it's made me totally reconsider this, because I don't want to go to all that beautiful work only to find out that I can't move my arms at all. And I don't want to knit a size that's 2 sizes bigger. what to do. I am going to put it in timeout. I'm going to think about this. I may end up taking one of these patterns as a template and then just using the colors of the Birkin, because I really love them. I really love these colors right here. And I've got all this Brooklyn tweed in here that I've invested in. So I'm going to have to think through this. I'm going to set it aside. I'm going to set it aside. It may not be a sweater, become a sweater at all. In fact, there's a couple things made with loft shawls that might be really pretty. But I'm just not going to go forward with this. I'm probably going to have to take it off my Make 9 list. Oh, by the way, this basket here, have I showed you guys this? I don't know if I have. Although it does sound familiar, like maybe I did. This was my father. I'm back. I was really losing the light yesterday, and I just, hold on a second. I just thought that wasn't going to work. It was going to get darker and darker. So we got a beautiful sunny day today. Yay, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. It does so much for my spirit to have a sunny day. So I was telling you about my father-in-law's egg basket. And he very kindly gifted this to me years ago before he passed away, because he knew how much I loved it. I love baskets. I have a lot of Longaberger baskets. I sold liners. I made custom liners for them for years, and so one of the perks of that is that you get to get all the baskets and you have it as a tax write-off. Anyways, my father-in-law's mother grew up in Tennessee, and when she was young in her marriage, they moved on to Indiana where they farmed. And my father-in-law during the Depression would go with her to the market where they would barter eggs. And I can't remember, but he told me once how many dozens of eggs this holds. And he would carry it for her. He was her only son, and I just think that's so sweet. I could just picture them walking down the road like that. But it's beautiful. It's in excellent shape for something that old, and I want to use it. I will use it. I have my motto is you need to use it. Don't put your pretties on a shelf, use them. So this is my treasure, and in it sits my Birkin, which sadly will probably bite the dust, but I will repurpose that yarn for something else. It's just a shame. It's a lovely pattern. So I was going to tell you about my other knitting woes, which I guess there's 2 more. So I had a total of 3. They say trouble travels in 3s. Anyways, the first of those would be, I took with me on my trip to Tennessee, I took in my sweet little Alice bag. I love just showing it to you guys because I love this metallic. Is that pretty? I took the neck sock design, and the neck sock design was going to be the Off with Their Heads, and it was for the Queen of Hearts, which is in Alice in Wonderland. And I have written out the pattern already, and it's a beautiful antler cable that goes down the front, and antler cable goes in like this, and it just looked like hearts nestled within each other. And if you recall, for those of you who are new, you wouldn't have, but some of you who've watched me from the beginning of the Wonderland Sock Club development will remember that I got this beautiful Madeline Tosh what is it called? Twist. It's their sock yarn. And I just have always loved the colors, and I thought it would just be perfect for that. But as I started knitting on it, it quickly became evident that the cables were not going to pop as much with this yarn as they would a solid yarn. And I may still go ahead and knit this up so that you can see the difference and why sometimes you want to use a solid as opposed to a variegated. But for the purposes I needed it to be, it's not going to happen before February 1st. So as we were driving home, when we go through Kentucky, there's always this billboard that says yarn, which always makes me want to stop. And so I asked my husband if we could stop there and I could run in real fast and get some red or pink yarn that would work for my pattern. And he very kindly let me do that. He didn't rush me at all. I was in the hurry. And so when I went inside, I asked the lady to point me in the direction of the sock yarn. And she took me to a back room and she said, the fingering weight yarn is back here. Now I should have noticed, I should have heard that she said fingering weight, but I was in a hurry and I went back and I spotted this instantly on the shelves. And I thought, this is perfect, it's beautiful, look at the colors in it, I could just drink it up. And I had her ball it up. It's a Dream in Color yarn called Jilly. And as I was casting it on, I thought Dream in Color already had a sock yarn. And then I got this far. And suddenly I realized that this is a single ply yarn. There's no twist in it. It's just a little single ply yarn, very much like Madeline Tosh Light. And I instantly realized that this wasn't going to work because I don't knit socks with Madeline Tosh Light because there's no nylon in them. 100% merino will knit beautifully. It will show those cables, I think. But as far as being on my feet, the wear and tear, it's not going to work. And it's also superwash. And that combination together just wasn't a good one, I don't think. So I stopped and realized very quickly that you guys weren't going to get this pattern for February 1st, but I did remember that at home earlier around Christmas time I had ordered this John Arbor, or maybe Arbun. I see a lot of British podcasters talking about it, and so I wanted to try it. I got mine from the Woolly Thistle. And I will knit those socks up in this and possibly that other variegated color so you can see the difference. But yeah, that was one of my tales of woe. Now let me tell you about the last one, and then we'll call this whole podcast a wrap for today. So, earlier on, this sits in my garden party bag. I love doing this to you guys. This is what I love doing. Wait, this is what I love doing the most. This is what I love doing the most. I've got these tangled up. This is what I love doing the most. You have to pull the ends that have the little balls on them. So here within has sat, because it's a rather big bag, all of these lovely, I don't know if you remember them, they're Wunderland from the Wonderland collection, and it was a series of these minis. Well, they're more than minis because the total is 670 yards. I'm not sure how much each one of these weighs. Anyways, they were sitting on my windowsill where I'd taken a picture of them. You might have seen it on Instagram. And the more I looked at them, the more I thought, I really want this to be a shawl. I don't want them to go on my feet. I want to wear these. So I thought it would look lovely with a solid neutral, not a solid, a neutral. This is actually a tonal. This is from Knit Picks. And I started with a black, which was too stark. So I went with this, and I probably want one a little bit darker and a white. I think this will have 5 of these little balls and then 2 neutrals. And I wanted to knit a pie shawl because I love pie shawls. I love when I read Knitter's Almanac by Elizabeth Zimmerman, I cast on that July project. She said that shawls are a great thing to do in the summertime. I don't know if you know about that book, but she takes appropriate things to knit, seasonal things, and puts them throughout the year. And so I thought, I'm gonna knit a pie shawl. They're great fun. I like the whole principle of how it's based on pie, the formula pie, and each segment gets double the number. I'm not gonna explain it. I know how to do it, and I will tell you how to do it, but I'm not going to try to explain it here. Anyways, the concentric circles just build. And so I started with this, the yellow, and I did the Emily Ochre circular cast on. And then I moved into some brioche with the gray and the yellow, because I wanted that to be a transition into the solid gray here, or tonal gray is what this one is. And I wanted the solid, I wanted to use brioche as my transitioning the colors, and then I wanted to have a lace, but more a textured kind of lace for the solids. And so I looked through all my stitch dictionaries, and I found this grapevine, which I thought would be perfect. And I've always liked that stitch. It's caught my eye in a lot of things I've looked at. So I went ahead and I typed it all out on a spreadsheet similar to what Helen Stewart gives us when she does her shawl designs, which I so understand now. That is the easiest way to design, is just put it on a spreadsheet so you have your stitches out. Anyways, and I started knitting it, and I got to the 12th row, which was the end of the repeat, because I need to have whatever pattern I choose needs to fit within 48 rows. And I was knitting along, and I thought, this is not looking like the grapevine. I wonder if I did something wrong. And I counted, and I recounted, and I counted again. There's 256 stitches on this round. And I could not see a problem, but I could see that it didn't look like the picture. And so I did what my granddaughter always does when she's thinking about something, or when you ask her a question. She's 5. I did this. I wonder if there's a problem in the book and they misprinted it. Errata. So I went to the publisher's website, and sure enough, they had not only goofed with that pattern, that when they went to replace it, they totally replaced it with something different. So this is what they replaced it with. Which I do like it a lot, and I thought, that'll work. And then I saw that it's 20 rows and it's not gonna work in this section of the shawl. So it's back to the frog pond. This one goes. Not the whole shawl, just the gray part. And I am finding that this is the process you go through when you design. If you don't like to frog things, don't even think about designing, because you spend a lot of time in the frog pond. You spend a lot of time calculating out numbers. I've used more math in the last 6 weeks, 2 months, than I have in years. And you test something, it doesn't work, you test it again. Anyways, that's the process, and I enjoy it. It's just a whole nother level of knitting that I'm doing now, which is a lot of fun, because knitting is fun, right? So the one last thing I want to tell you about was I was really excited because I was talking to one of my friends in Colorado, telling her I was going to do this. And she had put up a picture of, hi Sherry, she put up a picture of a beautiful Colorado sunrise or sunset, I can't remember what it was, which warms my heart because I miss that. And she said, wouldn't it be beautiful in a shawl? And I said, run it through a color generator. How many colors do you see? And she said, she sees 5 plus 2 neutrals. I said, that will be perfect. I've got a shawl for you. And so Sherry's going to be testing it for me. And she loves a challenge. She's up for a challenge. We challenge each other a lot. She's a great friend. And she will be knitting a Colorado sunrise Mad Hatter shawl, which will be lovely. Because knowing Sherry, she's going to spin all the yarn and she's going to dye all the yarn. Anyways, that is it for today, friends. Thank you for stopping by. I enjoy blathering on. I apologize for the gloominess of the beginning of this episode because the skies were gloomy, and I find my spirits getting gloomy when that happens. But it's beautiful, it's sunshiny, and we all love sunshine, don't we? So you guys take care. I love hearing from you. I love seeing you knit the things that I design. I love getting to know you. If you have any questions, pop them on over in the Ravelry thread. I'll be glad to help you. And you guys take care. Until next time, 2 weeks.